Protests over the failing economy are erupting in China. The House of Representatives passed a bill to tackle forced organ harvesting in China. Then more on this week's China News headlines. Welcome to John Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. You probably know the companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with it. Incogni helps stop them. I'll explain more at the end. So do you remember the first time you tried a double stuffed Oreo and thought, this is great, but how did it take them so long to figure this out? Well, I felt the same way seeing that the U.S. House of Representatives just passed the Falun Gong Protection Act to counter the Chinese Communist Party's forced organ harvesting. Which just goes to show you that the House has a heart and a brain. At least enough to want to stop the theft of hearts and brains. The bill passed with broad bipartisan support and is now headed to the Senate. This is the second time this has happened, possibly because some senators found it hard to stand up for Falun Gong while weighed down with all that Chinese money lining their pockets. But after criticizing those failures, the House is trying again. The Falun Gong Protection Act requires the U.S. to work with allies around the world in raising awareness of the CCP's forced harvesting of organs from prisoners of conscience, including from practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation practice that got so popular in China that the CCP came to view it as a threat. If you want to raise awareness about it, there's over 10 years of videos on this channel you can share. Like and subscribe. But the bill goes far beyond just that. It would also allow sanctions on Chinese officials responsible for the organ harvesting, require the U.S. to avoid cooperating on organ transplants with China so long as the CCP is in power, and require the heads of the State Department, Department of Health and Human Services, and the National Institutes of Health to submit a report within a year on the details of CCP forced organ harvesting. The report would be used to determine whether or not the CCP is committing an atrocity crime against Falun Gong practitioners under the Elie Wiesel Genocide and Atrocities Act of 2018. I can think of a few other instances where that kind of determination would come in handy. Got plenty of old videos on that as well. Share, like, and subscribe. But as U.S. President Donald Trump would say, the winning isn't over yet, because House Republicans have also passed H.R. 881, the DHS Restrictions on Confucius Institutes and Chinese Entities of Concern Act. I've been screaming into the void for so long about these issues, and it feels like the void is screaming back, but like in a chill, reasonable way. Should this pass the Senate, this will defund universities that host a Confucius Institute. 55 Democrats and 211 Republicans voted in favor of the bill, while 153 Democrats voted against it. Which is crazy, because when have American liberals ever seemed cool with colleges indoctrinating students with Marxist ideology? And continuing with the theme of the CCP in American education, an investigation by the Stanford Review has uncovered Chinese academic espionage at Stanford University. Stanford has already come under scrutiny over accepting Chinese funding, but this goes way beyond that. The investigation reveals evidence of a widespread CCP intelligence gathering operation at Stanford, focused on stealing not only technology, but the means and methods of American innovation, especially when it comes to Stanford's top-notch AI research. To get a big picture of how sensitive research works at Stanford, China cast a broad net, getting tidbits of information from Chinese students in different fields and roles on campus. For example, take Anna, who conducts sensitive China-related research. She began receiving unexpected messages from a man named Charles Chen about networking on campus. Slowly, his questions got more personal and more persistent. He even encouraged her to visit China and offered to pay her travel expenses. Anna realized something serious was going on when Charles told her to erase their chat history and talk to him only through WeChat, which is heavily controlled by the CCP. Personally, I would have realized something serious was going on when a guy offered to fly me somewhere, all expenses paid. But I guess kids these days really like keeping it casual. He also revealed certain details about her that she never told him and advised her to remain in China only for up to 144 hours, just brief enough to avoid visa scrutiny. Alarmed, Anna contacted authorities who began an investigation that revealed that Charles wasn't at all affiliated with Stanford and went by various aliases. China experts believe he was an agent with the Chinese Ministry of State Security, or MSS. He had contacted many students, mostly women who studied China-related topics. Makes sense, Anna and he didn't put a label on this, so he was seeing other people. For ethnically Chinese students at Stanford, this kind of thing is all over the place. One anonymous Chinese national at Stanford said, "Many Chinese nationals have handlers. The CCP wants to know everything that's going on at Stanford. This is a very normal thing. They just relay the information they have." The Chinese Scholarship Council, or CSC, funds around 15% of Chinese students on American campuses. Anonymous experts have claimed that it requires the students to regularly submit situation reports to Chinese diplomatic missions about their research. But they also have to report on dissidents among other Chinese students on sensitive topics such as human rights abuses or praise for the Dalai Lama, with consequences for their families back home. So within the CCP, snitches don't get stitches, they get scholarships. One anonymous CCP official who was educated at Stanford said students are chosen for CSC grants based on party loyalty tests. And here I earned my scholarship with good grades and extracurricular activities that prepared me for the real world like a chump. So, what can be done about this? Well, even speaking out and revealing all of this is a big step. According to the investigation, previous investigations have been hit with accusations of racial profiling and shut down. Because it's historically racist to try and prevent Chinese spies from stealing your artificial intelligence research. AI stands for Asian Intolerance. In fact, this article is only the first in a series for the Stanford Review coming out about CCP actions on Stanford campus. But with growing federal scrutiny on college campuses and universities over radicalism, spying, foreign influence, hopefully there's going to be some sort of change soon. And the chill, reasonable Void yells back at me about this too. And after the break, protests are breaking out in China. Welcome back. Protests have erupted in China. Furious workers are demanding back pay. While Trump's recent tariffs are playing a role, a lot of these protests are actually due to pre-existing grievances with the CCP's economic failures dating back years. China's economy has been hard hit by a real estate debt crisis, a rapidly aging population, and zero COVID policies, leading to widespread issues of workers not being paid. For example, according to Radio Free Asia last month, construction workers in North China's Tongliao threatened to throw themselves off the buildings they were working on if they didn't receive their unpaid wages. One even fainted there. With skyrocketing youth unemployment and low domestic consumption, something was bound to give, even before the trade war with the US. Worker protests aren't new in China. In fact, there were quite a few protests during the pandemic. You'd think the Communist Party would be in favor of workers rising up, but not like that. And it's entirely possible that these protests might ramp up as the economic situation deteriorates thanks to the trade war, because these tariffs aren't exactly making the situation any better.
This is the scene of a furniture factory closure in Guangzhou. Pieces of fabric that were still being sewn hang from the sewing machines. The warehouse is full of raw materials, and there are some finished sofas and other furniture lying around. The place looks deserted and sad. The person who posted the video said the factory shut down and the owner moved on. After struggling year after year, they still couldn't make it. This is how tough the furniture industry is right now.
If China continues to couch this issue and doesn't come up with a timetable, their furniture industry won't have a chair leg to stand on. Taiwanese Foreign Minister Lin Chia-lung is leading a delegation to Texas today. This will only be the second official visit of a Taiwanese foreign minister to the U.S. since Washington ended official diplomatic recognition of the island in 1979. Taipei's foreign ministers in the past have only made stopover trips on their way somewhere else, or participated in informal appearances, so quite a step up from essentially the diplomatic equivalent of a layover, where you have just enough time for a bathroom break and maybe grab a Cinnabon before your next flight. But this trip is a major game changer. U.S.-China tensions are already at an all-time high for a number of reasons, mainly trade, fentanyl, and Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific, which is bound to come up during discussions on the trip, along with research development and economic cooperation. The visit probably will result in another strongly worded statement from the CCP, followed by another naval drill near Taiwan. It's like clockwork. But hey, at least the US is hosting Taiwan again and willing to work with them. This is great, but how did it take them so long to figure this out? It's double stuffed Oreos all over again. Now I want to tell you about a way you can help fight YouTube censorship. But first, this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online or use apps on your phone, there are tons of companies that collect your personal data. I'm talking names, social security number, home address, employment history, all sorts of things you might not want to be public knowledge. When I signed up for Incogni 3 years ago, I discovered there were dozens of data brokers that potentially had my private information without my permission. This was terrifying. So what did I do? I've been getting as many of these companies as possible to delete my data from their systems. And I did it using Incogni, and you can too. Incogni has already gotten my details removed from 542 of these data brokers who've collected my information. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So get Incogni for yourself and reclaim your own data. Go to incogni.com/uncensored and use the code uncensored to get 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. And now, how to fight YouTube censorship. A lot of you have told me that YouTube refuses to notify you about new episodes, even though you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Well, here's what you can do. Subscribe to our free weekly newsletter. It has links to every episode we publish that week, so you won't miss a thing. Plus, it has a bunch of other fun stuff you can only get in the newsletter. The link is below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.